have several friends in law enforcement, and some of them are detective investigators, and they always say, I don't decide where to go, I follow the evidence. So when I first went to seminary, and I should say I went reluctantly, because all I ever wanted to do after I retired was to coach football with the rest of my life. But my son's autism diagnosis changed all that. And we began to experience hardship that ended up pushing us to the margins, to the fringes of congregational worship and fellowship. And we soon very quickly found ourselves on the outside looking in. And I don't believe it was anyone's intention that it should be that way, but just with the discomfort of our differentness, our sudden differentness. You know, the people in our church, many, if not most of our friends at the time, did what people instinctively do. And according to contact theory, which is also mentioned in the book, people tend to like people who are much more like themselves than not. And so it takes intentional effort to look past the obvious. So how did it become autism, the church, and a new American Reich? I didn't intend to look here, but the evidence took me to the historical accounts of Nazi Germany. That was preceded by 50 years of distancing the culture from the biblical worldview. And we all know that we've seen this now.
Yeah.
One of the men that I admire here, who's a faculty member at the conference, wrote an article about tolerance being a way of silencing dissenting opinions, particularly Christian opinions. You know, so we've been allowing that for decades, and now we have the nerve to act surprised when Christians are openly persecuted in the streets. So what we've done is we've chosen fearful silence as a means of getting along with people who don't like what the Bible has to say. And that has to change, because as the book shows, the church's problems, if left uncorrected, become the nation's problems. And that's exactly what happened in Germany. The church remained silent and quiet. It kept its head down, and it hoped the storm would pass, and it didn't pass. It got worse and worse and worse. And my warning to the church of the United States today is this isn't going away. You're going to have to choose sides, and you might as well educate yourselves in what the Bible teaches. Sanctify Christ in your hearts, which is always the part that gets left out, even by people who quote this scripture. Sanctify Christ in your hearts and prepare yourself to give an answer for what you believe with gentleness and respect. So that's what I'm advocating here in the book. But most of us, I would dare say, are probably not prepared to do that. And, you know, we hear cliche little terms, you know, like, well, your son's going to be okay because he doesn't really understand the gospel. And that's an assumption that people make without ever speaking to him. My boy understands the gospel. Now, he can't communicate what he understands as fluently as you or I, but he certainly knows that Jesus is the author and creator of everything we know and see, and he is the initiator of our salvation, and he will be the one that completes it. But if we assume that they can't understand it, what we've done is we've given ourselves an excuse for not presenting the gospel to them in the first place. And that's not what we're called to. And unfortunately, our silence also emboldens our unbelieving neighbors and the bureaucrats they're trying to fund a, you know, nationwide healthcare program, for instance, and they're eventually going to see that it always costs more than you think it will, and they're going to start looking for ways to cut costs. And people who can't advocate for their own needs, we're going to permit them, just like the Germans did, we're going to permit bureaucrats to redefine what it means to be human. And then we'll start excusing them for stripping certain people of our human rights.